at TiE. He took over the reins of TiE Bangalore when the Bangalore ecosystem was just about warming up, and he supercharged it with his usual Pradeep energy. That Bangalore never was the same after Pradeep handed over the charge as the president of Bangalore. TiE Bangalore had reached greater heights, and I remember it very fondly because my involvement with TiE Bangalore really accelerated during your term, Pradeep. I remember how we met at some event and you pulled me into saying, hey, we're doing a large event, come join the fun. And it was my baptism by fire in terms of getting an inside view of what happens within the TiE board, the event and stuff like that. And I've never looked back. I think I joined the board under your leadership in 2008, 2009, and I've been on it since then. So a personal thank you for pulling me in as well. And I must say that you really, Pradeep, has been my inspiration to turn an entrepreneur. The only name I heard on campus when I joined, and frankly, early 97, I don't think any one of us knew how to spell entrepreneur properly. So when I went to SP Jain, the only name that SP Jain Institute in Mumbai used to talk about was you. And I still remember pursuing you through your office to come and give a talk at the campus, and it was so electrifying that I decided that day that, listen, someday, sooner or later, I must be on my entrepreneurial journey. And I'm sure you've inspired hundreds and thousands of others to embark on their journey. So this is this spirit that we want to really celebrate, Pradeep, in our conversation today. So from all of us at TiE Bangalore, at the entire ecosystem, that we represent, a huge round of applause as we salute your spirit of trailblazing and of creating this ecosystem. And that's what this award is all about. To honor you, we've actually gotten to plant a tree in your name at a lake in Bangalore. This tree is being planted on the 1st of September and will be nurtured by us to make sure that it grows the way that you have kind of provided shelter to hundreds and thousands of people. This tree will stand testimony to your entrepreneurial spirit as well. Interestingly, a few weeks ago, we were talking to another entrepreneur who's a fascinating wildlife photographer, and his cause is for cancer in children. And we said that let us present you with this stunning photograph that has been shot by him. Ramkrishna Srinivasan runs a initiative called Wildlife for Cancer. And the proceeds of this picture that we will present to you will go to Iksha Foundation that looks at funding children with severe cancer care funding issues. And hopefully, definitely for sure, one kid's life will be better due to this evening event that we're having. With this, on behalf of the entire board of TiE Bangalore again, and all of us, the 120 odd charter members, the associate members, and the larger ecosystem that we reach out to, again, a huge round of applause from all of us for inspiring us. Without further ado, I know we have, we're really waiting to hear your thoughts on your journey, on your reflections, on your learnings that you want to share with other entrepreneurs. Without further ado, let me hand this over to Priya to kickstart this conversation. But Pradeep, thank you so much.
Thank you, Madan. On a spontaneous element, whatever is the amount that you will raise through that brilliant picture, I would be very keen to give a matching amount so we can give the foundation a little more money. So Priya, please let me know the amount that you are going to give, and I'll do a matching amount of that.
Terrific. We will coordinate with your office on that, Pradeep.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pradeep. Thank you, Madan, for that introduction, and most importantly for setting the stage on the Trailblazers Award, the background for it, and your memories of Pradeep and what he means to TiE, our organization that has been nurtured so wonderfully by Pradeep. But I want to quickly sort of linger on something that, again, is so quintessentially Pradeep: the spontaneity, the responsiveness, and the big heart, which is reflected in just a minute ago. It's so Pradeep. It is so much the thing that he does. He thinks on his feet, he thinks with both his mind and heart. But the spontaneity, I think, has been a defining part of Pradeep forever. And the part of Pradeep that I particularly, sort of cherish in life. Pradeep, first and foremost, congratulations. In most ways, I think you do more credit to the award than the award does for you. You have received so many awards over the years and so many recognitions, and spoken and unspoken. You are who you are. You are Pradeep Kar. So when we were sitting down together, after 21 years of TiE, and sitting down and saying, where have we come and what are we doing? And there were some tough questions and some good milestones, but some tough questions we asked. And we realized that in some ways, the founders and the people who shaped the journey of TiE, shaped the journey in more ways than one in Bangalore, really owe a lot to people like yourself. So I want to say a big thank you. And I'm going to, applaud the fact, not just of who you are, but the fact that we know you, and the fact that we've all benefited in some ways from your generosity in sharing your experience and your knowledge. So thank you once again. And I am going to take every opportunity, Pradeep, since I see another example right now of your spontaneity and your generosity, of making sure that TiE Bangalore pulls you back as often as we can and as often as you can spare enough time to be able to direct, drive, give some insights, because we would love to have that energy back in some ways. I know that you've got your own stuff to do, but we would love to have some of that direction and some of that buzz back on loan as and when you can spare it. So I hope I can rely on you for that. So Pradeep, I'm going to go back to a moment in a lift many, many years ago when you probably don't remember, but I met you for the first time. And I remember it was a launch of some company, and I was sitting in a talking to a headhunter. And at that time I wasn't a headhunter. I was with diners and, doing different things. And I just saw this person who I think from experience, or from what I remember, I hope you won't think it not complimentary, but somebody who I feel was the quintessential Peter Pan. The question, the curiosity in your eyes, the switched on energy. There was so much of asking. So I still remember this question as being both so direct and so blunt, in terms of what you were saying. But Microland was sort of growing at that point. You said, I hope too many people of Microland are not applying to you. And we all laughed, but that the headhunter was obviously very uncomfortable. But that was how it was. It was just one of those things that the company was so close to who you are. And, it was an extension in some ways of who you are. But every time I've met, I think I have never left a meeting and people say I'm energetic. It's not about energy. There's something about who you are in terms of intense, curiosity is the wrong word, exploration, the interest you have in somebody. It's when you look at someone, I find always that you're almost saying that, what have you got that is interesting to me? What is it that I can learn? What is it that I can understand a little better about the world from you? And every conversation was always very, very, very intense from that point of view. And me, at that point, being a reasonably raw young manager at diners in those days, I mean, it was so interesting to have those once in a while conversations that we met at some event or some business thing or the other. But that was who you were. And then you skyrocketed. And I think you were one of the entrepreneurs, Pradeep, that took a lot of people with you. You were beloved. People were very affectionate about you. And that again changed the way people looked at entrepreneurs. Earlier, it was either a family enterprise, or if it was a new structure, there was a certain distance that you had to keep. You had to be an entrepreneur and be this big guy who has employees, and therefore that. You were never that person. You were always, accessible, endearing, who you are. You never, you never sort of diluted the fact that you were this person. You loved the music, you loved people, you loved hanging out, and you know, all that was still who you were. And it sounds very simple today, but I do know that 25 years ago or 30 years ago, this was a very different time for Bangalore. And I'm harking back to it to only say that today's entrepreneurs may or may not realize the kind of changes that you made were not just in terms of your business ideas or your entrepreneurial push. It was also about bringing in your own unique personality, your own drive, your, in some ways, your interest and your curiosity and your exploration into the space. In some ways, and I'm going to quickly dwell on that. Not just were you everyone's darling, but you were the media's darling. I think I remember having you couldn't open the paper without seeing something about Pradeep at that time, and about Microland. And then, of course, when new organizations came up, also about, whether it was Planet Asia or India.com or ITspace.com or Net Brahma, which was started much later. There was just so many things that were engaging and took up the radar. The other thing which I remember was you brought in, and I think this is still there with you, you brought in a strong sense of enduring cockiness. When I say this, please don't get me wrong. I don't mean that in little boy kind of form. The confidence that people have today is a very studied, you have gravitas, you have a certain something, but you were who you were. You spoke, you said the same thing to media that you would say to an employee. You were very, very confident, but in a very, very appealing kind of way. So the whole feeling, the personality of the entrepreneur, I feel, changed, Pradeep, when you came into the entrepreneurial space. The growth of Bangalore as a Silicon Valley, has been mirrored in a large way by who you were, what you did, and some of the changes and the future that you saw. So when I was asking someone, I said, how would you describe him? This media's darling came in very unusually because it was somebody from the media. But the other thing was talking about you as a futurist. And in some ways, an entrepreneur factory. Because don't forget, Pradeep, you have churned out more entrepreneurs by just being who you are. And by Microland, setting free so many people who chose the entrepreneurial world. I think your generosity in that is unparalleled. You've had a lot of people who have moved on and done great things. Some of them have done pioneering work themselves, and you should be very proud of them, and I know you are. But you have been generous in letting them go and explore. And I think Bangalore is the richer for it. So I do believe I may be sounding a little over to the top because I'm remembering all the good times. And there has been a journey which you've evolved, pivoted, done very different things. So I want to linger both on where we started, who you were, your unique personality, what you've done for Bangalore, how you've changed the entrepreneurial system. And also, before I go into my first question, Pradeep, and I promise to shut up after that, I've spoken for much longer than I intended, is I want to just look at, for me, what defines you and in some ways Microland. I was looking at your website. You have normally the 3-line mission statement, which comes out looking really good. And I looked at yours, and your lines just said this. Look at the energy in this statement. We turn 32 with metal tested, clients thriving, people prioritized, and our ambition stoked. I have rarely seen something that is so forward-looking, so positive, so confident, and so assertive about the company's profile or what the company hopes to do. I loved it, and in some ways, I think this is really who you are. But apart from this very interesting conversation that I had with Kalpana 2 days back, and I was very, very upset because she was sitting over a cup of chai in Kunur, enjoying a biscuit, and she did not have my, I was certainly sitting in my pokey little study. I was feeling very upset and jealous, but we had the most amazing talk about you. And, about also, I always feel the spouse has such a different perspective. I want to ask you, Pradeep, there's so many questions I want to ask, but I want to ask the first very simple and very obvious question. What has dramatically changed in the last 25 years? And what's your advice to an entrepreneur today?
First, I just want to start by saying, it's a privilege and honor to be receiving this Trailblazer Award on behalf of TiE Bangalore, where I feel very close to both professionally, personally, and emotionally.
Yes.
And thank you for this honor, and thank you for all the kind words, Madan, Priya, in the larger ecosystems. It's also a responsibility to ensure that I live up to the expectations of TiE Bangalore, to ensure that going forward, that to some extent you've caught me to ensure that I get a little more involved than I have been in the recent past with TiE's mission of promoting entrepreneurship. I think your question was, over 25 years, what has changed?
Yes.
And therefore, what advice, if I may call that to be an advice, would I give an entrepreneur?
Yeah.
I think a lot of things have changed. And let me talk of 32 years, because that's when we started, 1989, right? That's when Microland was founded with like all entrepreneurs with a small dream, small aspiration to make a difference and build a small company. And okay, I think what has changed dramatically over the last 30 years or 25 years is scale.
Scale.
Scale. And when I'm saying scale in every aspect. If you look at the newer, I would say, technology, internet commerce companies, right? The new internet unicorns, right? At a very young age, these brilliant companies and exceptional founders have been able to execute in volumes, in range, in geographies of tremendous amount. That has changed. So the fearlessness of an entrepreneur is dramatic today, right? The aspirations of the new entrepreneur is how quickly can I cross 100 million subscribers for like customer subscribers. There is very little, I would say, worry or fear of saying, if I can do this in India, can I do this in Asia? Can I do this in North America, etc.? So that has changed. Okay, aspirations have changed, scale has changed, and that to a large extent defines the new gen entrepreneur. You can't think small, you can't think local, and therefore your aspiration then needs to get funded by capital that can sustain it. So not only one needs to have, I would say, think scale and an idea that percolates the need, but it's also the aspiration to say, to reach this entire amount, I need to raise 100 million, some number of capital. When we started, broadly think about when we started off in the IT services industry. The market was hardly India. It was initially India, and then Y2K created the international market. But it was services-led, which was to some extent, we can debate on that, linear-led model. And therefore experience, stability, consistency, proactiveness was necessary in the services industry. And therefore you have companies like Infosys, TCS, Wipro, which employ 500,000 employees, right? And still growing at that rates that they're growing. And you have all the new unicorns who have come, young and aspirational, 3 years, nothing to lose. But what has created this is also the ecosystem that has changed. Think about it. The Uber system would not have worked if Google Maps never worked, right? So the entire ecosystem of, I would say, investors, of consumers, of technologies, this conversation may not have happened if collaboration technologies are not mature. The pandemic would have been a disaster for businesses if the collaborative platforms like Zoom, Teams, etc., did not exist. So, and that then also got supported by the telecom revolution, which came in the later part of early part of 2000. Right, Y2K, after Y2K, it was the telecom deregulation. So a lot of things have changed. And finally, the final thing that has changed dramatically, culturally, is, I would say, families' acceptance of their young children doing a startup. Acceptance by society that failure is fine, right? You don't think twice, I started a startup, it didn't work, and I did something else. In our ecosystem, that was a big issue. Culturally, it was a big issue. People thought you're a startup ecosystem because you didn't get a job somewhere else. So that has changed dramatically, right? And, from an Indian standpoint, if India has to have the aspiration of growth of 10, 12% with the demographics that India has, entrepreneurship is critical for employment. Otherwise we have such a large workforce coming into the job market every year. The only way we can keep them engaged, challenged, productive, and proactive is the ecosystem of entrepreneurs that provide jobs to all these young boys and girls. So I would say, this is a golden era from an Indian standpoint. Right? And if you also look at, interestingly, the new unicorns are all serving domestic markets. The prior unicorns in the technology industry served international markets.
Yes.
Right? And that has changed dramatically. If you look at all the top 10 IT services companies, because that's the space that I come from, they all served international customers. They didn't serve the domestic market. Whereas all the new unicorns that we're talking of today, when I'm saying all, I'm saying 80%, 80-20 rule, are serving domestic customers. So the consumerization of India, led by demographics, by, I would say, wealth creation, by education, and whatever else you may call it, has created this new ecosystem. A Byju's would not have been a Byju's, as an example, if its market was North America. Now, Zomato would not have been Zomato, its market was North America. So a lot of things have changed for adapting to the local ecosystems, which the technology industry, the Microsofts of the world, etc., got created serving their geographies earlier. They started serving North America before they came international. So these are small subtle changes happening as we speak.
Some of them, Pradeep, I hadn't really thought of. For example, the fact that so many of the newer startups have been successful in serving domestic markets, and some of the issues that you raised in terms of family acceptance. I mean, you don't really prioritize that, but I do know that things have changed so much. If you look at, for example, the TiE, the TiE Young Entrepreneurs, I've been looking at people straight from school. So the transfer from basic education or even graduation or not into business is not such a big deal today. It's actually valued, and we cannot undermine how important this cultural shift is, because India is always an India which is in its own cultural ecosystem and its families, etc. So I think some of the points are, they're learning for me too, and I see that the issues that you've talked about from apart from technology, the fearlessness that still continues but has been amplified, the access to capital and the way that one approached it, the failure. I think that's a huge shift, really, really huge shift. I think it's very important for today's entrepreneur to recall somewhere. It's important to look back in order to be able to appreciate where you are and then to go forward. So there are many things that come to mind when you speak, but I think this has been really good. I'm going to dwell.
Let me just add to a point which will give you a perspective, which right? My first job was Wipro.
Yeah.
This is 1983, right? And Wipro, most people, even when in our company, when we ask people and say the new freshers to say, what is the long form of Wipro? Most people don't know, right? And the reason I'm bringing out, my dad was in Tata's, retired, pretty much serving one company in Tata's. I had a job offer. I did an internship at Telco, automobile engineer, B school. And I joined Wipro, which was then known to me as Dalda company. So there was a big shift in my parents' mind to say, where the hell from a Tata and from a Telco, which was the anchor, to join a Dalda company. This is IT in 83. When I left Wipro, in 85 to join a startup called Computer Point.
Yes.
Computer Point's only office, corporate office, retail office was a small 1,200 square feet store on Dr. Annie Besant Road in Worli in Mumbai. And we were India's first computer retail chain.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my father, getting appalled that, I joined a store, and he came to the store, saw the head office, only office, corporate office, to say, look, if you really want to work in a store, let me try and buy you a store. So I would say there was a big shift in those days, in how entrepreneurship was perceived.
Yes.
It's a big shift now. So it is a huge shift when I think about those issues that we had to deal with, at that point of time, besides capital.
Besides capital, yeah. And, I do understand when I talk to people who are 20-somethings, and I do feel that sometimes we need to be more relevant. I try not to hark back because I know it can be very depressing and irritating for a young entrepreneur. But I'm going to go back, as I said, Pradeep, and I hope you don't mind me being a little, disconnected in terms of revisiting a couple of questions. But the young entrepreneur advice is something that I want you to sort of come back to when we discuss. My next question, Pradeep, is, we talk about DNA a lot, and I do believe it's an overdone question, but there is a certain something. You see it in entrepreneurs today. There is a certain something which does instinctively call, to move into an entrepreneurial world. So I want to tie up these two questions, which is, how do you know you're an entrepreneur? And second is, what is the DNA? There's a certain high that comes from being an entrepreneur. So you've got to have that, that risk-taking ability and that over-cliched thing of, wealth creation, etc. But these two questions, how do you know you're an entrepreneur? And what is the DNA that is needed to make that happen?
I will say there's one more thing that came to my mind. I will also go back and correlate some of your questions and my responses. I think what has changed, again, this is my limited and humble view, is that because of the capitalistic nature of society currently, most entrepreneurs, I would say 95%, as a number, as a trend, don't hold me to the number, will not own their companies beyond an exit point, right? So therefore, the difference between the technology entrepreneurs of the past and the technology entrepreneurs of currently is that technology entrepreneurs in the past were very conscious of cash flow. And again, the ecosystem was different.
Yeah.
They were very conscious of ownership. They did not want to dilute dramatically. We're very conscious of not raising disproportionate cash, because if we raise a lot of cash, you own. So what has changed dramatically is the entrepreneur's mindset, partly driven by the ecosystem, partly driven by the venture and private equity players, is to focus on wealth creation in a short term and not institutional building. So what you might see, if we have the same conversation, inshallah, we all are alive 25 years from now, many of these companies may not exist in that manner, right? So therefore, the young entrepreneurs today, they have to think deeper to say, am I in it to make short-term money? Build it, and as soon as you build it, you're thinking of who will buy it.
Yes.
Then to say, I'm going to build an institution that will survive my time, and if it survives my generation, then you have to think about capital, people, customers in a much more different light. Because today's average entrepreneur owns less than 6% of the company.
Mm.
Our entrepreneurs own 50% of the company. And if you go through history, companies which have dominant shareholding survive much longer than founded by companies which have dominant shareholding by promoters and founders survive much longer than companies that have very minority shareholders. So that has changed because their mindset is short term.
Mm.
I'll make money. You can look at, for example, the entrepreneurs of the Internet 1.0 revolution. A lot of people sold their companies, made decent money at that point of time. They were in the early 30s. Unfortunately, they didn't go on and build another meaningful company. Right? They stopped. They maxed out with what money they made and what they had to work, but their ability to create an impact over the next 30 years has been lost. So the entrepreneur has to be very sensitive and careful to say, when you get an exit, you still retain the hunger to create an impact on society and impact on the ecosystem. So having said that, right?
Yeah.
So, the question that you said is, how does one know I'm an entrepreneur? Right? First, there must be a deep dissatisfaction in the way you see how things are.
Mm.
And you have to, I would say, feel that you can do better in changing that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It is not, there's an opportunity to make money and go, because money is a derivative of the entrepreneur's journey. It is not the end point.
Oh.
Right? It happens because you do a good job, etc., right? So there must be deep dissatisfaction in how things are and what you can do to change it. So that's one element, right? And the second element would be an ability to deal with uncertainty and ambiguity.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You will never be, very sure how things will span out. The third element would be a tremendous self-confidence to say, look, no matter what happens, we all in our journeys have gone through difficult times.
Yeah.
But that innate self-confidence and belief to say, look, I will figure this out. I don't have an answer now, I'll figure it out. And the fourth element is also you have to be I would say a perennial optimistic.
Yes.
Right? Because we've gone through difficult times. And if I'm showing on my visual face that I'm scared of company's future, think about the employee's conflict. He'll panic.
Yes.
So no matter what goes on, you have to show confidence and faith to say, trust me, I'm going to take care of this bus's direction. And you as a passenger or co-pilot or co-driver or co-owner will arrive at the destinations together. Right? And finally, I would say, it's early enough that entrepreneurs needs to decide, to think about, to say, what is it that they're trying to build? Not from a business idea or an opportunity. Are you building an institution that will survive 30 years? Are you in it to make money? Because the decisions and the directions you will take will be different. When I read articles to say XYZ had raised $240 million for a valuation of $1 billion, if you raise $1 billion, at least your valuations will be $1 billion. Right?
Mm.
It can't be less than $1 billion if you raise $1 billion. But you have to be very careful. Therefore, by getting that amount, you're getting an opportunity to play, but what you're going to give up is different, because then you're giving up decision making, you're giving up culture, you're giving up long-term thinking, etc. There are a lot of things that you have to think about a little differently. And our generation grew up thinking those lines.
Mm. When you spoke, Pradeep, about companies that stay longer having a large percentage of ownership, not the 5% that exist.
No, companies with founders having larger percentage of ownerships survive longer.
And that is
longer.
Yeah, that is actually an interesting perspective, because it is happening. And you see this, there are companies that have started reasonably recently in the last 25 years, but have had that consistency. But the couple of other points that you mentioned, which is the traits of an entrepreneur, or what really makes you an entrepreneur. The eternal optimist is all very well, but it's a hard journey, as you know, and there must have been many times when you've when we were talking about this, you're going up the escalator the wrong way. And, it's a frightening moment. And I'm sure those nightmares happen to many, many entrepreneurs. But giving up decision-making, giving up culture, even owning those two is such an important part of being an entrepreneur. The qualities of an entrepreneur that you remember and that you see today, there's a huge difference. But what do you think has been a big driver today, apart from wealth creation, for the surge in entrepreneurs today? And Bangalore sees a huge number. I mean, we from TiE, Pradeep, whether we're looking at the TiE Women Global Competition, Bangalore has had the highest number of women entrepreneurs who've applied, which is 111. So globally, we're the largest cohort. Whether you look at the TiE, the young entrepreneurs, that is at the 12th to second PUC, 10th to second PUC kind of levels, it's amazing. But what is it that sort of is what do you feel is a driver today that you see in an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I would say, and again, you can't generalize.
Yeah.
In any situation, there are always exceptional exceptions. So I will leave aside that comment here. Second is that it's difficult to generalize in what I see, but clearly there's a new breed of aggressive, aspirational, and ambitious people coming to start companies. They're fearless, right?
Mm.
It does not, they're 27, they don't think twice of, I would say, building their business in 25 countries.
Yes.
So they are fearless from that standpoint, right? So I would say, if you look at, if I think of take Google as an example, Google in the early stages got Eric Schmidt from Sun to come back as the chairman, etc. So if the young entrepreneur, is rightly advised or thinks long term, he or she can learn and benefit from, I would say, experienced people who tell them what are the issues in building organizations that survive 50 years. And that perspective will help. But today the competitive landscape is different. When your investor owns and invests so much money in you, you are driven by his agenda. You don't have a choice. You can't control it. You've taken some money on a promise. He's put 100 million. He owns 60% of your company. He's going to pretty much drive the agenda. And he has a 7-year horizon of his fund. So the private equity player wants to see what's an entry and what's an exit. And what happens before and after, to a large extent, with all due respects, he really is not concerned.
Yeah.
Because compensation system, his recognition systems, his reward systems, his ability to attract capital is based on his input and output. But as an entrepreneur, you're there. I used to tell my investors, you only understand money. You don't understand people.
Mm.
You know how to invest, you know how to exit. We have to ensure that in any cycle, we have maintained the positivism, we have maintained the commitment, their growth, their future over a long period of time. So an entrepreneur must be very clear on how to balance what to give up and what not to give up, right? And it's a choice. There's nothing right and wrong in the way you build a business and what you do. It's a choice that you take early enough as you build a business. So my choice when we started Microland was, I'm not a star. I'm a big company in the early stages. So I always thought long term, right? So branding of a company and how we build, we for 32 years, our logo has not changed, right? We may change the byline, but it's not changed. We thought of this very early, and technically we were distributors when we started off, but we've always said we'll keep a brand going forward. And we are a small company on the way to become a large company. And obviously we went through good ups and downs, but 32 years later, we're still there in the game.
You are. And when you were talking about ownership, we are one of the few companies that have chosen not to go public. So has that been any particular reason, or it's just been related to what you talked about in terms of giving up decision making, or the very ephemeral quality of culture, which I have now come to understand what culture really means, or company culture means. Earlier, it was just a word to me, I'll be honest. So what are your thoughts in the fact that you've chosen?
I would say two things. Going public is only an event. It's not the end game. Fortunately, the IT services industry generates cash, does not need cash. So fortunately, we are in an industry that generates decent cash, and we have zero debt. So there's no motivation or desire to go public, because in the new startup ecosystems, they have to go public because the investor need an exit.
Yes.
Right. But having said that, there's also a responsibility when you take a single dollar from someone else. You have to be responsible to ensure that the dollar delivers value because he or she trusts your company to invest in. Right. But we are at a scale and size today that we will look at how the future will open up, and we'll see. But at the moment, satisfied not having any external investor and not needing cash.
You were talking earlier, Pradeep, about you weren't talking about mentoring, but you were referring to having a person that you can reach out to for advice or help. And I know you're quite passionate about mentoring. I personally believe that whether you meant it or not, TiE was a more organized way of doing it. But as a person, you've been a natural mentor to, I can't say hundreds because it's so inappropriate, but I'd say, tens and maybe hundreds of people who have just benefited from being under your shadow, under your shade, more than shadow. So about mentorship, which is something which I think you're such a natural at. What are your thoughts on that as relevant to today?
When I'll talk of mentorship, I will largely talk of the fortunate colleagues that I've had a privilege to be part of their journeys, who have I would say been in the Microland ecosystem, and then have moved out to do incredible things.
Yes,
it gives me personally tremendous joy when someone from Microland starts a company, builds a company, and does exceptionally well. Because life is short, right? It's a journey. At some points, the journeys align. At some points, they differ. And a lot of people join us back after they go out, do something else, and come back. So from my mentoring standpoint is that, we were created with groups of people who had an entrepreneurial mindset. So when we hire people, we're looking at people who can deal with ambiguity. We're looking at the entrepreneurial mindset, because we are saying if there are 10 engines of growth that we can create, but 10 entrepreneurs within your company, then you can do much more. And during the Internet 1.0 era, which is when we had India.com, Planet Asia, and all the other companies, there was such tremendous talent that one had, because we had a vision that they agreed to. And they did very well. So I'm personally, more than delighted when I see ex-colleagues of mine doing so well. And it's an ecosystem. Their success is a success that we can all share and be proud of. They don't take away the success from you. It's their success. We share the success and we share their recognition that they have.
Yeah.
And there's several people, if I look at the Bangalore ecosystem, who have gone and done so well. And it gives me a lot of joy that there's some benefit that they got being in Microland, seeing what they saw.
No, I think they always will carry the Microlander title with them when they go. And I think that's a title that they take a lot of pride in. From your point of view, Pradeep, I think, while all entrepreneurs are essentially and should be insecure, because that gives you that edge to keep going. I think some of your essential confidence as a person and your sense of secureness about who you are, your company, what you do, has, I think, morphed into letting these wonderful people grow within your company and then outside your company. I personally think that this is one of your biggest achievements, Pradeep. The company is a great thing, but the birds that have flown from the Microland space have been, I think, your legacy in a very, very, very vast way, and says a lot for your mentoring, but says a lot for your sense of generosity as an entrepreneur. And I think that's something where we see the younger entrepreneurs perhaps don't feel it or don't see it, but we need to be able to plug into that more often.
No, so, I would put up, I'll give you a perspective which is slightly ahead of that. For an entrepreneur, it's very important, the way I looked at it. You're competing with established players, right?
Yeah.
If I look at the conundrum in today's technology ecosystem from the internet entrepreneur standpoint, which is the new gen, right? How quickly can you get to scale? And how much capital do you need before the established player gets his act together to get into scale, right? So it starts, you're talking of, there are three things that I have an additional view, right? It is not insecurity, I'm saying insecurity. If you're insecure, you should not be an entrepreneur. If you're from a corporate world and you're always seeking recognition, you were a vice president in XYZ multinational, then I'm saying don't be an entrepreneur, because you'll always seek glory and, I would say, recognitions which technically belong to the institution than to you.
Yeah.
I think the essence of what you said is that the effort and the investment that an entrepreneur should take or does take in hiring exceptional people is the start of the ecosystem. If you don't spend the time till very long time, even today, beyond a certain level, I interview everyone.
I remember.
Even today, right? I interview, now today, obviously, when we interview thousands, but beyond a certain level, working hard to, I would say, sell your dream, to, tell the person to say, look, there's a journey that we are in where you can be a big part of the impact that we create, is the early part. If you select the right people, there's a high probability that they will do well wherever they are.
Yeah.
So, you can be generous, you can be mentorship, but if the person is not exceptional, there's a smaller probability that he or she will excel. So the journey starts by being very secure about yourself. I use the word impatient to insecure.
Yeah.
Spending time hiring people.
Yeah.
Spending time hiring people, nurturing them, guiding them, supporting them, and letting them make mistakes and fail, because that's how we will build their confidence.
Yeah. And I see, Pradeep, that your investment in people has been legendary. And I know, being a headhunter myself now, I know how much you personally get involved in the top level, hiring. But what's interesting for me, and I was looking at your leadership team, and I realized that a minimum of 3 people have been those that have been with you from the start of the journey. They may have left and come back, but they have been with you from the start of the journey. I mean, that is a huge. I was looking at Ashish, who's based out of the US. I remember him from the early days of Microland, he and his wife. And I was thinking, and Sharad, of course, who's been there forever. But wonderful, fantastic people who have always held the, held the dream. BK Jawahar has moved on, and BK is such an intrinsic part of TiE today as well. So that's fantastic. And I'm going to move on to my next question. And this is something that I want you to think about. Again, being on the escalator the wrong way, there are times when you really had to test your faith as an entrepreneur. So which has been your absolute lowest point, which we can learn from, and which has been your, as an entrepreneur, your Everest?
I would say, I won't say there's an Everest, which only means that you have reached the peak. So I would say we are on the way to climbing a mountain which is never ending, because we can't define that's the peak. So I will leave that aside. But if I say which way some of the high, high points at various phases of Microland journey, and I want to be practical. We have spent 32 years. The average, I would say people in this audience will be under 30, so they would not know Microland or what the industry was. I would say clearly, bringing Compact, we were a startup company in that parlance, to sign up with Compact, which was a $4 billion company at that point of time, to tell them, look, we will be your partner for India, etc., was a high from experience standpoint, and then ensuring that we don't let them down, right?
Yeah.
So that was one. Hosting Bill Gates' first visit in a Microland event in 1997 was a high, clearly, and I don't want to spend time on what went through, right? And if I look at, on various points of time, I would say, some recording has stopped.
Sorry about
The
that.
second was, I'm just going to quickly cover some of the highs. Was clearly, when got recognized as India Young Business Achiever Award, going to Korea, going to Ireland to represent India. Yes. That was a high at that point. There's several elements, right? Including meeting Jeff Bezos in '99, having Jack Ma from Alibaba speaking at a conference, etc., right? I think the low was when we moved from hardware completely into the internet economy, Internet 1.0, etc. And then the dot-com crashed in 2001. And then we are suddenly left with, uncertainty. We had money in the bank, but it was uncertain. What do we do next? And then repivoting it out to say, look, analyzing where the world was going, where the IT services industry is going, to say, look, it's only a matter of time that infrastructure will move offshore.
Yeah.
And having the confidence and the, I would say, tenacity to play the next 10 years, manage that, was the challenging period, at that point of time. And I guess, we all have to go through that, because we remember that if everything was high, you don't remember anything. The difficult period tests you, and it also tests your leadership. As you mentioned, we have an average tenure of over 20 years of leadership, right? The average people running the company are over 20 years with the company, despite all the elements.
Yes.
And teams bond together in difficult times more than in happy times.
That's true.
On that.
You're forged in the in the heat of a furnace.
Yeah, and therefore it's the responsibility of the leader, of the pilot, to give them confidence to say, we will see this through.
Yes.
Right? Because they're banking on you as the leader to say, will this guy be able to steer the ship through? Do I need to worry where will my salary come again? So that's the confidence that one needs to have.
Scary as heck, but superbly exciting. I'm gonna I have like a dozen more questions, but I know we're running a little late, but I want to make sure that we get some questions from the audience. So I'm going to let Vijeta just moderate that bit, if I may, if there are questions from the audience that would like an answer. While that comes in, Pradeep, if I can ask you just one more question about perhaps the personal traits or the qualities that have held you in good stead in the last 30 years. You've had, you're who you are, and you're a great family person. I mean, I love meeting up with Kalpana, and I haven't seen Pranika for years. And as I said, I'm sure that while you're sitting here, your two wonderful border collies are probably curled up on the floor under you. You learn a new thing every year. You have, your energy doesn't stop. But I remember you also mentioning, and this is connected to the personal traits, which, it's your authenticity is something which has been something not that I am noticing. I know this is something which a lot of people have commented on. I was joking with Kalpana day before yesterday that when you introduced Kalpana several times, when we met somewhere, said, well, this is the better half in between, between the both of us. I mean, she's the one who has the real intellect. And we would smile. Kalpana is brilliant, as you know. I mean, she's got one of the best minds I know, one of the most crisp conversationalists and, intellect. She started BATF. You've been a very supportive spouse and dad. And I'm delighted to see, Pranika is interning with Microland right now. But your personal traits in the last 30 years have been rooted in the family, in yourself. Tell us a little bit about that while the first question comes up from Vijeta.
Clearly I'm blessed to have Kalpana and Pranika in my life. And I'm blessed that they, I would say they understand, appreciate, and support me in my craziness and my nuances and stupidities over the years, right? But having said that, I think one thing that has stayed, which I'm very conscious of the fact, subconscious, it's natural to me, is stay grounded, right? Never get anything in your head so much that, carries you. Always be on the ground, and, highs and lows will happen. And what defines you is who you are, not what you do and where you have done and what you have done. Right? And finally find happiness in small things of life.
Yes.
From that standpoint. And clearly, I would say, what I don't want to feel is that I did not have time for family or friends. Right? Work will go on, money will be there, etc., right? But focus on what is meaningful and will sustain time. Business will happen. So I always try and, I always tell all my Microlanders to say there are three priorities that when they join Microland. One is your health. Second is your family. Third is work. If you reverse the priorities, then it's not going to be sustainable.
Yes.
So I always tell anyone, if you have a health issue, you have a family issue, don't worry you're missing a review or missing a meeting. No big deal. Focus on those important things. Work will happen on that. And I try and see if I always try and find time for all the nuances that I like, at the cost of work sometimes, but so be it.
Pradeep, I remember those wonderful terrace occasions. What was it called? What Thursdays was it called? I don't remember.
Thank God it's Friday.
Thank God it's Friday. And the beer drinkers club that I think did more for business and the Silicon Valley of Bangalore than any industry fora did. So I think the ability to kind of bring fun and create a greater degree of traction and interaction, it's like a super water cooler, if you want to put it that way, where things happen under a really exciting umbrella. All that is you, Pradeep. That energy, it's, for me, I cannot believe 30 years has passed, because in some ways you're exactly the same. In some ways you've changed so much, but that plugging into that energy is something that has never ceased to amaze me. And it's authentic. That's who it is. So I'm very conscious when I say this thing about being the eternal Peter Pan, or being, this futurist or this entrepreneurial factory, that I don't want to box you. But there has been so many legends that you have created, that you have made with Microland. And more than anything else, your journey of Bangalore and your journey of Bangalore as Silicon Valley and your journey of Microland and your own personal journey as a person who has come from it's a boy next door kind of thing. It's like it could be anybody. It could be you or me, a good professional background, middle class, worked, studied well, moved into something, and then started doing these amazing things of taking risks and building businesses and creating success and creating value. And your values and your culture has been something that you've sustained all these years. I know that I'm just give me a second while I'm just looking. Okay. There's a question from Sumana here and Roshni. So let's start with Roshni Dattagupta's message, which is, how do you or investors in general evaluate a startup? What makes a startup attractive to you?
I think, first, I have chosen not to invest in startups because I said, I don't want to get distracted to what I'm trying to build from that standpoint. But broadly, there are two broad elements, right? One is, when my understanding of for what the investors look at into a startups, and it can be different for different people, is the power of an idea or the power of the team.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? Is the idea so powerful and has such a larger scope and scale of impact that appeals to the ecosystem, and then the investor says, I buy into the idea, I believe into this idea, I believe on the impact, and I'll figure out how to supplement the team to build this idea. Or you find a very good entrepreneur who say, I like the team that they have. It's a great team, and we'll work together to refine the idea going forward. So there are many examples where entrepreneurs have gone to investors with an idea, but they left the room with a different idea, mm-hmm. and yet got funded for that idea because the team was so powerful, because they were able to understand, appreciate, and adapt.
Absolutely.
One thing that I always tell all entrepreneurs, go and make your pitches to investors, because they don't worry of getting money. Mm. They will be critical, they'll be brutal, they'll give you feedback that you need to reflect and introspect upon.
Yeah.
Because no one is going to spend so much effort trying to give you honest feedback and brutal feedback. And if you think about the feedback that you get in every investor conversation, that's the most valuable feedback you must think through.
Very good. So you're saying that go do it and pivot, figure it out, resolve, respond as it goes on. Sumana has another question. Sumana Bachu.
Thank you so much. Sorry to interrupt. Thank you so much. It makes a lot of sense. And one thing I want to say, that thing you said about family, still judging you if you want to start something of your own. I think it's still so prevalent in Bengali families that if you try to do something on our own, my dad would still say, why you didn't get a good job, and that's why you have to become an entrepreneur. I so resonated. Thank you, Pradeep. It was wonderful hearing you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roshni. I didn't realize you were willing to talk. I got this as a direct message. I would have asked you to speak, a question. Is Sumana here, or shall I, Sumana, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah. So my question to Pradeep was, what's your take on entrepreneurship, wherein employees themselves act like entrepreneurs within the boundaries of an enterprise and work on a product or a platform idea and take it to market?
I would say that's a brilliant and ideal environment for an entrepreneur to get, in a protected ecosystem, to take an idea and be able to get capital and support to actually test the boundaries of its success.
Right.
The one thing that the entrepreneur will not get the experience is an ecosystem of finance. Here there's an acceptance, there's a peer ecosystem that will provide support, etc. But the best part is in any work environment, if you feel strongly of an area that the company should do, should engage with, expand into, rethink, etc., structure it as an idea that you would like to present it to the management to say, here's an opportunity, this is what I want to do, this is what the outcome will be, and this is what I will do. Give me a budget, and this is what I will, this is the outcome you can expect from me. And if you're willing to, I would say, I'm going to take a 50% salary cut. I'm just saying as an example, which means I'm putting risk into the game. But if I succeed, then give me a 5x of the upside. And an employer will look at it very positively. Today, most people want to be an entrepreneur, but they're saying, I still want my salary increase, protect my downside. And that does not happen. So if a true entrepreneur must take the risks that an entrepreneur takes outside.
Got it. Okay. Also, should the employee bring this up at hiring time, or should the employee take some time to get into the company and then raise this point?
Yeah, so my question to you is, an entrepreneur does not think of these questions.
Right.
Yeah, you don't think about these questions. It's natural. It must come natural to you to say this is important. And if you're thinking at the hiring time, don't join the company. Go and do what you're thinking of. See, you're saying I want security of your job, but I want you to take the risk on me with no downside to me.
No, if it's
I'm only, I would say, taking the question to an extreme point. But if you want to try an entrepreneurship, I'd rather you be an entrepreneur and try it outside. Right? Remember, nothing ventured, nothing gained. If you are willing to risk it out, you have a chance to build something meaningful, right? So you take the call very early. So if you're saying, should I tell them when an employee is interviewing you, he's interviewing you from basis on what you have done to a fit of what he wants you to do. If you at that time are saying, look, I'll join your company as a head of HR, but by the way, I want to do a product company, he'll say, don't waste my time, because I'm not hiring for that, right? So be very careful, because then you'll get caught in a world which you won't be here, not there.
Right.
I think blunt but effective. I think that is an interesting response, Sumana, particularly because there are companies like a Cisco or others who have accelerators which kind of nurture this. But within another organization, it's different. And you can see when a Pradeep talks about this, there's a certain sense of, hey, can we just get our head on straight? Do you want to do this or do you want to do that? And how? Because if you want to, just go and be an entrepreneur yourself. I think today things are much easier. Pradeep, if you look at it, the opportunity cost is one thing, but the loss today we can work from home. We've got stuff that we can do. There's so many. It's so much easier. One of the things that we focused on and we talked about is even with TiE is with the number of people who had either been let go. This is a great time, if any, to be able to start a business. And one of the things that we thought of was an idea called Spring, which allows where the government would support it and things like that. But I'll talk about that another time. I think there's lots of interesting questions coming in. There's one input which I just thought I'd just share because there's so many people who have written in saying, I sold you your first car, the Opel Astra. I love the Opel Astra, by the way. I sold you your first mobile way back in 1983. And somebody has said, Sham Kumar, in fact, here has mentioned that you inspired me to be what I am today. The feel of an entrepreneur came from, and I relate to this because I used to have those stickers on my car, but that was for multiple reasons, which is from the Microland stickers all over the car. Way back in Bangalore, 1989. I remember those stickers, Pradeep. I mean, this is what it made. But here's another question. If you were a totally first-time entrepreneur today, wanting to build something of meaning and value in the long run, Nishant is asking this question. If he's here, if he can come on video, fantastic. Which industry or specific area would you like to venture into and why?
I would say again, this is my limited view. I would say an entrepreneur will, one, you must feel passionate of the issue. If you do a maths to say industry issues, and then you narrow it to say in this cell is the maximum opportunity, but I don't feel strongly, it's not in me to solve that problem. Yeah. So I would say, no matter where you are, if you see a real life problem that bothers you immensely, to say, I'm not going to accept the way this system works, right? And I'm going to try and see how I can fix it. And your passion must be, I would say, deep enough and strong enough to survive difficult times. So the only thing that will make you go through, you may come to an edge when, your funding runs out, etc. And you're on the verge of maybe making the last payroll or raising the capital. What the investor will see is your commitment to the cause, your passion to the cause, and you're willing to do whatever it takes for it to succeed. So I can only say that, my experience is technology. So let me just retain my understanding of technology. It's never so good. The tailwinds for the Indian industry is tremendous. And if I look at the consumer marketplace today, if you think about it, we're all in aggregate economy, whether Uber does, Flipkart does, they only aggregate demand, and Zomato does, etc. But there's so much more that is going to happen in the next 10 years. So I would say the huge space is the Indian consumer, I would say domestic consumer, focused by leveraging technology to deliver consumer experience. Today, every business is a B2C business, because somewhere you're serving an end customer through the platform, through the technology, etc., etc. And the larger the network that you're relating to or integrating with, the more successful you will be, because there'll be a lot of ecosystem players that are going to be driven to your success.
Absolutely. So, but you wouldn't like to commit on waking up tomorrow morning and saying, I'd love to do this.
You have to be careful. I love to do this. That's not how passions get sustained. You have to be very sensible to say, I'm so frustrated with look at Funish, who did Red Bus, right? Yeah. He was so frustrated with the ecosystem to say, I'm not letting this rest. I'm going to work hard to fixing it, because that will drive you. Because remember, you have to, once you get into the business, you have to be prepared to say that I'll run this business with or without cash. And I won't say with or without cash, that I'm not going to give up so easily. And don't take a space which requires a lot of capital, because it's dependent on capital that you have. But unfortunately, in today's world, if you have inadequate capital, you can't sustain scale. So don't spend a lot of effort and time thinking of the capital required to build your business, because you're competing with people who are very well capitalized.
Thanks, Pradeep. And I have one last question, and I have one statement. So I'm going to, and Nishant, thank you so much for that question. I hope that you got the answer. I mean, you got the inputs that you were searching for.
And Nishant, this is 80-20. There's always an exception of 20%. Don't take it your gospel. If you feel strongly about it, that space, go ahead and experiment. I'm just saying it's 80-20. There's no right or wrong in this.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
I have one question, which is from Vijeta on behalf of young entrepreneurs. And this is, I think, a sort of a move from the TiE program, the Young Entrepreneur program that TiE has, which is, how do you youngsters get into entrepreneurship or being change makers? So do you apprentice with leaders and ecosystems help, or should you just start a venture even if you're in university?
I would say there's no right or wrong depending on what you do. Mm-hmm. But I think what history has shown is that, and what investors today also are looking for, is a co-founder ecosystem. Mm-hmm. Because during difficult times, you need someone to pull you up to say, it's going to be okay. So you have to be clear in what you're trying to do. What are the skills required for its success? What do you bring to the table? What do you think you can learn? And what you don't have to the system that is required for its success. And then finding an ecosystem partner who joins you in that mission. And if you're getting a founder partner, co-founder, be very careful to ensure the value systems, the beliefs, work well, because conflicts between partners is clearly what one has to avoid, because it's going to be draining energy, time, and objectives. So I would say there's no right or wrong if you feel strongly, but history has shown that people who started very early have started in the technology space.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, if your business requires lots of people, then there's some experience of managing people, there's some experience of managing money that comes in. But if a business is writing code and building a product out which is very significant, then a younger person may be more effective, or he or she can get a partner who's brings the other skill sets that is required.
Thanks, Pradeep. I'm going to I'm just going to go on to one statement that was made by someone here, and I want to be able to say this from Vasudha. Vasudha Mohan remembers joining Microland on 1st December 1999 as a contract employee to handle the GE project. And she says she learned so much from Microlanders, and she's so grateful for the organization for shaping her as both a professional and an entrepreneur. Thank you, Pradeep Kar, is what she's written. And I think a lot of people are going to echo Vasudha, and I need you to remember that, while you are at this Trailblazers moment today, Pradeep, that Bangalore remembers. Many entrepreneurs today remember. And I think, though you might know, you need to know.
No, I also want to thank Vasudha from the time that in 1999, where she sowed the seeds for a GE relationship. Today, GE continues to be our largest customer. We manage them globally in 174 countries. We're the single provider for the network in 174 countries, and the collaboration. But clearly what Vasudha and her colleagues did that time was sow the seeds of foundation of Microland's success in GE. And they're still a very large customer after many CIOs and CTOs of GE.
Yeah.
And I will tell you one example, one anecdote, which may be relevant to an entrepreneur, which is very interesting. In 2005, we were bidding for the network. There were 11 providers, all telecom providers. There was no Indian IT services provider. And there was the chief technology officer of General Electric, I don't want to tell of this company, which gave me a piece of advice, which I've never forgotten. He says, no one who does business with my company dies of starvation. They all die of indigestion. So you screw up, we terminate you. Yes. So it's a very important feedback to say that, when you're dealing with customers, enterprise customers, don't take them for granted. Ensure that every customer is satisfied, because that will be a reference point for you to go forward.
I really like that. Indigestion, but not starvation. Sometimes in today's days, one doesn't know which is worse. But thank you, Pradeep, for those, spot on, great insights in terms of conversation, in terms of inputs, in terms of just sharing your journey. I want to say thank you so much. I'm going to hand it over to to Madan in a bit. But before I do, Pradeep, I want to just share with you a few things which I know that have, it is your legacy, it is your special relationship with TiE. Today is a special time for all of us. I want to be able to remember that and remind you that your DNA has been something that has, of course, initiated a lot of different people to set up. But having understood that entrepreneurs are creators, consolidators, disruptors, and all three today are in the entrepreneurial stream. But, it was harder then. And today, I think it's difficult. Pranika, it is lovely to see you. Hi. And we also have, while you've evolved, as a person who's not a family entrepreneur, you've looked at, even though you say, jumping into something, you've always had in some ways a plan B. For example, with Indya.com, I still remember when Kalpana and I were talking, she said you still had a fantastic idea before its time, which was on the KTV kind of a concept that was there. And there were things that you were thinking about. So you've always had the ability to be able to balance out being extremely a risk taker and being somebody who's conscious of backing up and making sure you have a backup plan. The services on tech today may not be as exciting as what we see in terms of the tech startups, but there's so many things that you've done, and the way you've segued, whether India.com was one of the most exciting stories, I think, the whole, the single page ads, the incredible salaries, and the kind of things that India.com did before you sold it to Rupert, Murdoch way back. The issues on the different journeys that you've taken, your own upbringing, your metamorphosis, but your, as you said, being grounded. Pranika is here, and Kalpana would agree. There is a sense of, who you are, your sense of self without being carried away, without also losing that sense of confidence and, being thinking into the future. The issues that you always a part of you, which is the never say die. What we were talking about earlier in a conversation was that lage raho, 10,000 hours to success. All these have held you in really good stead in the last few years. And keeping the faith on a bad day has been something which all of us, you've shared some examples which you've all learned from. What you're looking at, and in terms of going forward, when you talked about cultures, is also looking at institutionalizing a founder-driven business, because yours is a closely held company, and passing on the baton to also ensure that the values and trust that you have created are continuing, and that is something which I really love. When I was again chatting with Kalpana, one of the things that I was really so happy to hear is that all the things that I have talked about, the curiosity, that tremendous sense of engagement, that huge interest, almost incredible interest that you have in an individual. I've never been, had a perfectly banal conversation, heard with so much of, like what's going on kind of thing with you. And it was, I think, a great charm of yours to be such a active listener and so interested in people. But your curiosity, your last mile focus, your undoubted perfectionism. And I do know that you're the first one to jump into a new tech activity. So whether it's Siri or telling something, any new gadget has to come to Pradeep. I know this is something that you love to do. But I think the evolution to, in some ways, I see this as well, to a greater sense of peace and calm and a sense of being, one with yourself. I can't imagine the fact that you actually meditate now. I mean, that's something which I would still find very difficult to think of. But you still don't move out of things like looking at the broader, larger issues, of living in the moment, of still, engaging to be out of your comfort zone. And in some ways, the restlessness continues, but in a slightly more mellow fashion. So the learning that you do, Pradeep, I know you learn one thing new every year, and that's something I'd love to sort of end with. I know also that you think a lot more of giving. And that's something you haven't spoken of, and I'm not too sure how comfortable you are speaking about this. But the giving, the fact that you have so much of focus on, whether it is on Nilgiris or on Kashmir, the girl child, and particularly on education. I know you've spent a lot of time on that. If you have any last thoughts on sharing about that, I would love to. And the last thing I would like to end with is, while you are Pradeep Kar 30 years later, it's a different view, but it's the same goal. There is a public service. There's collaboration on excellence. There is still that standard which says lowering the bar is not acceptable, while you still protect individuality. These are things which I have been seeing in what you have done. So I'm going to leave you with that, great thanks for being who you are, and for being who you are to Bangalore and to TiE, and to creating so much of change. I would hand this over. Thank you so much, Pradeep, for this wonderful conversation that we have hopelessly gone over time with. Forgive me for that. But I'm going to hand this over to Madan. But if Pranika has a few words to say about her dad, she's welcome to join in, but no pressure. No pressure. I'll get Madan to start. If you want to say something, you're more than welcome. But go easy on the tea, okay? I am very, very jealous of Kunur Chai and being in Kunur. Madan, over to you.
Thank you. I'd love to get Pranika in if you want to come in and say a couple of words, Pranika.
No, that's fine. No stress.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. I was scared of the most difficult question.
Sorry.
Yeah, and Pranika was saying, I knew I shouldn't have dialed into this conversation. They put me on the spot.
Wonderful. I think she said it on the chat. that's the shortest, best sentence that you can say. So, Pradeep, this was such a trip down the memory lane, such a trip reflecting on why one turned an entrepreneur and reiterating all the core beliefs that we entrepreneurs carry. I mean, you touched everything. I was just doing a word cloud of the words that you put out. It's fascinating to see you tick all the boxes in terms of the focus, the passion, the persistence, the resilience, the building to last, the equanimity, and bringing your whole self into this thing. I don't think there's no half measures here, and that truly came out so powerfully over the last hour and a half of our conversation. So, Pradeep, from all of us again, a huge round of applause. I will request each one of us to turn on your videos, get into the frame. Let's do a nice picture where we will all clap and say cheers to Pradeep and more power to you. And Pradeep, we definitely look forward to roping you back into TiE, bringing your energy to guide us on the next stage on how do we become much more useful to the customers that we serve, which are all entrepreneurs. We want to pick your razor-sharp brain on enterprise customers and how do we make sure that we don't die of starvation, but die of indigestion in a way. I think that's what we need back at TiE. So we'll definitely pick up the threads of this conversation. But on that note, I know we've taken a much longer time. May I request each one to come on to the screen, and let's all do a nice, happy photograph. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Enjoyed the session. Priya, you've been exceptional host, and the research that you have done. And I also remember meeting you in the Diners Club when there was a company that Planet Asia used to contest was Netacross. That used to work with Manish Modi, who now runs Printo.
Yes.
We're doing a similar company. So I remember coming into the Diners Business Services at Cunningham Road, the first building on the left-hand side. So I do remember all that. Thank you so much, Madan, Priya, and I hope this is time well spent. At least someone in the TiE ecosystem benefited by some little experience of mine.
Thank you so much, Pradeep, and Priya. Thank you for being a scintillating host as always. Thank you.
My pleasure. And we're going to make sure that we see Pradeep as often as he possibly can in the near future. And you've got the best award from anyone that you could possibly get, which is Pranika says you're the best dad in the world. So I think we'll end with that. And BK, if you want to say a quick hi, that's fine. But I know you've sort of stepped in and stepped out. But all the very best. Everyone.
No, I've been here.
Hey, then BK, come on. I'd love for you. Just come on the screen and say just a quick word from you.
No, it was nice. As Madan said, going down memory lane. So as Pradeep went through the various stages and phases.
We're partners in our journey.
Yeah.
Yes.
BK and me, we're our partners. And we still continue to be partners in the journey.
Yes.
So yeah, it was great. Thank you, Pradeep. I think
Thanks, BK.
Yeah.
It makes me feel very special to see, BK on one side and Pradeep on the other, because I know this journey and I know this has been it's probably been more than 30 years, right, BK? And it has been such a family journey. So I know that so much has been learned and so much of love and so much of...
BK and me go back in 81. We were B school classmates.
Yeah.
So it's 40 years of our journey together.
BK, really?
Say a word.
And now we are bridge partners.
Yeah, we play bridge the pandemic, got us to playing bridge. So BK and me play bridge every Saturday, Sunday.
Wow.
It was the last 18 months.
I cannot imagine you ever playing bridge, Pradeep, because for me, you're the guy who will kill somebody in the table tennis. I have never seen somebody so aggressive on a table tennis table or squash or tennis, which I remember you play very well. But yeah, BK, is it true? Bridge?
Yeah, it's true.
Wow.
And Priya, for whatever trivia it is, it's not that it's nothing to do with my skill. It is to do with my luck. I came runners-up in the 22nd Winter Nationals of Bridge.
Okay.
1980. So there's some credibility, and I would attribute 100% of the win to my luck.
Wow.
So we've got a confession from an entrepreneur. The competitive streak never dies, but now we are able to sort of say, okay, part of it may be luck. All right. So this has been fun. Yeah, Pradeep, I've enjoyed myself. And
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madan, BK. Priya.
Pleasure. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.